The New York Knicks are a storied franchise. Dubbed the Mecca of basketball, they've had some legendary players cross through that team. From Walt Frazier to Bernard King to Patrick Ewing to Carmelo Anthony, the New York Knicks have been a staple of NBA history. But their name has lost its spark. The New York Knicks have been a losing franchise for most of the 21st century. There have been bad trades, horrible signings, and even worse draft decisions. But like I said, it was for most of the 21st century. You see, there was a breath of fresh air once Carmelo Anthony came to town. On the Knicks, Carmelo was electric. He was a multi-time All-Star, an All-NBA player, and the scoring title champion in 2013. Carmelo Anthony also led the Knicks to 54 wins during that 2013 season, which stands as the most wins they've had in a year since 1997. But after Melo's time in New York died down, it was more of the same for the New York Knicks. That was until this past season. The New York Knicks seem to be back as one of the steady teams in Eastern Conference. With the addition of Jalen Brunson, the emergence of Julius Randle over the last couple of years, and the progression of RJ Barrett, the New York Knicks won 6 playoff games this past season, the most they've won in a single playoff run since the 1999-2000 season. If not for untimely injuries, you could say this Knicks team would have made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and who knows what would have happened. But with how good of a season they just had, I do have some doubts on their ability to repeat it, and I'm a little worried for the New York Knicks. So the New York Knicks had a pretty interesting season. After a slow start, they really turned it around from February and beyond, and newly acquired Jalen Brunson had a season where he proved to be one of the league's best guards. Couple that with steady contributions from their role players, and they would end the season as the 4th seed. This team was built off of grit and teamwork, and in the playoffs, they were a force to be reckoned with. A first-round matchup where they were the underdogs against the Cleveland Cavaliers, they took care of business in 5 games, basically punking the young Cleveland team. In the second round, they fell short to the eventual Eastern Conference champion Miami Heat, but there was some promise there. There's a lot to be happy about as a New York Knicks fan, but it seems like this offseason might have left a little sour taste. You see, I expected the New York Knicks to be a lot more aggressive during the offseason, looking to potentially add more star power to their team in hopes of competing with the top dogs in the conference, but they just haven't done so. You go down the list and the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be coming back for revenge, re-upping on Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton. The Boston Celtics were just one win away from the NBA Finals, and they just added Kristaps Porzingis. The Cleveland Cavaliers have seemed to solve their shooting woes with the additions of Max Strus and Georges Niang, as well as banking on the growth of Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. The Atlanta Hawks got off a John Collins contract, the Miami Heat are in the midst of a Damian Lillard trade, the Indiana Pacers have made some good moves, and the Knicks offseason consists of adding Dante DiVincenzo and trading away Obi Toppin. So, considering the roster at hand, I do have my doubts because how much better can this team really get with their current construction? I believe that for the Knicks, it'll all depend on RJ Barrett's growth as a player. In the playoffs, RJ Barrett was solid, but through 4 seasons, he just hasn't really shown all that much. He was a top 3 draft pick, so by now he should have at least made an All-Star game as his peers in his draft class were able to do. He doesn't really have a reliable jump shot, his playmaking isn't eye-catching, and defensively, I wouldn't really say that's a strong suit of his. He has improved as a finisher, so that is a plus, but you would just like to see more from different areas. And as for the other young guys that are part of this core, Mitchell Robinson is a great defensive anchor and an amazing offensive rebounder, but you might want to see a little more on the offensive end. Emmanuel quickly took a nice jump in his game in the regular season, but he was really bad in the playoffs. And because of his height, his positional value is capped. And then there's Quentin Grimes, who also played pretty bad in the playoffs, but he was hurt, so I'll give him a slight pass. But then again, the on-ball chops just really aren't there for him, so how good can he really be? So with that, just how much improvement can the young core really make? And then getting to the top scoring pieces, Jalen Brunson is great. There's nothing bad for me to say about him. But Julius Randle, on the other hand, I just don't know. He was an All-NBA player this season, posting career high in points, but for someone who is 6'8", 250 pounds, he was just wildly inefficient. And once again, in the playoffs, he faltered. His averages dropped to 16 points per game, and he shot an abysmal 37% from the field and 26% from 3. I think for him, he just has to work more off ball. He's well built and is essentially a tank, so it's no reason for him to be taking nearly 2 times as many shots from 3 than he does at the rim. I like to see him operate more in the pick and roll and overall just be a smarter player, meaning less dribbling and shooting and more working off ball and slashing. But of course, all of these are things that Coach Tom Thibodeau has to instill into him. But I can't just say that the Knicks had a bad offseason because what really was out there for them to do? Well, they could have been a little more aggressive at pursuing another star player alongside Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. Paul George and Zach LaVine were 2 names that were linked to the Knicks, and trade packages revolving around RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, At the time, Obi Toppin and future draft picks made sense, but again, they just weren't really all too aggressive. Or maybe they could have been more aggressive in the draft. I just believe that there was more that they could have done to show teams that they were really serious about winning. You stayed complacent and you're going into next season with nearly the same squad. They're going to be banking on a plethora of different things going right in hopes of repeating last season's success. I hope it goes well for the Knicks because the NBA is better when New York is playing winning basketball, but I do have my doubts.